Today's interview is about one of the many rabbit holes that once you follow it down, it will lead you to see your overlord's vision for the world and its power structure with some more clarity. And you yourself, of course, and you are probably going to be part of the people, part of the peeps, not of the lords. You are buried deep down in that power structure somewhere. And going down this rabbit hole that we're going down today will also give you an idea where you are being buried in there. So this power structure is created right now and fast. And this particular rabbit hole is called Pax Silica, silicon peace. Podcaster and author Courtenay Turner knows a lot about this topic. She hosts the Courtenay Turner podcast, and she co-authored the book The Final Betrayal: How Technocracy Destroyed America. She co-authored that with Patrick Wood in 2025. Recently, Courtenay and Patrick did a long interview about Pax Silica on Courtenay's podcast, and I'm going to include the link to the interview below this video. Welcome, Courtenay.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
So what caught my attention when I read about you is that you're doing all these things, okay? And that's impressive enough. But then I read that you're also an aerial performer. And I thought, oh my God, that is incredible. So you have to tell me at least just a little bit about that. What kind of aerial performing do you do?
So I do all of them. So the silks, the hoop, I've done heart. I do the hammock. I've done pole. So essentially, I would do performances and I would do speeches, and the speeches were centered around my personal birth story. So I have a very unusual set of circumstances or challenges that I was born with. So I'm hearing impaired. We discussed that before we started. I was born with a bilateral hearing impairment. I actually learned how to speak by reading lips. I didn't get hearing aids. I was almost 6 years old. I'm also blind in one eye. I had fine graphic motor impairment, hypotonic limbs, stunted growth. There were all sorts of challenges. They told my parents the best they could hope was to find a nice institution for me to spend my life. Fortunately, they were wrong, and I'm here today to tell the story. So I would do speeches talking about movement as a metaphor for life and using my personal story and teaching people they could use their physical training as a tool and a teacher to help them overcome adversity in other areas of life. Is I personally believe it was very instrumental to me in helping me develop proprioception, kinesthetic awareness, and compensate for the challenges that I had. I also think it taught me a lot of tools about resiliency and, facing the adversity that I was dealt. Because the thing about physical training is no matter how much talent you have, you could be destined to go to the Olympics, but if you're sitting on the couch all day, you're never going to get there, no matter how much talent you have. Every athlete knows you have to put in the work. And every athlete knows they'll have good days, they'll have bad days, and there'll be a day when they're top in the world, and there'll be days where somebody else beats them. And these are very useful tools for all aspects of life. So I would do these speeches that were really talking about more of the philosophical elements of physical training. And I would do the aerial performances to show people what was possible when nobody thought it was, and because I loved it and it was fun. So like Cirque du Soleil, think of it like that.
Cirque du Soleil. Well, that's pretty incredible. You have to send me a video. Maybe I can put that cut it into the interview so that people can see it, because that's really inspiring.
Thank you. I'm doing a speech next week, actually, in East Tennessee, and they've asked for videos, so I'll work on that and send one over to you as well.
Wow, incredible. Especially, I have no idea how that is even possible with being blind in one eye, which impairs your depth perception and not
motion
problems
parallax.
with and then the problems with hearing and also the fine motor coordination. So that's absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, challenge, but it was fun. So,
well, you must be enjoying it. You must be. It seems like you are enjoying it.
I don't do it too much professionally anymore. A lot of it got canceled during 2020. So all the events that I had that were scheduled and, all of my speaking and performances were canceled. And then I moved in 2021. So I've done a couple since, a couple of conferences that I did. It was called Cause Fest, Creative Artists Uniting for the Sovereignty of Everyone. So it's kind of like an Artists for Liberty event. The speakers were by no means a monolith at all, but they were people who'd been canceled in one respect or another and maybe outside the mainstream. But it was really just an event to get people together in person because so much of that had been completely eviscerated, and to give a platform to various thinkers and performers and artists. And I did 2 aerial performances for that. So I've done several of those kinds of conferences recently, but I don't do it as much professionally anymore.
It must have, for you in particular, COVID must have been super hard because you rely on, at least partially, on reading people's lips, right? And you couldn't see the lips.
So incredibly depressed. It was a very, very difficult time for me and it was actually why I started the podcast, because I realized that I didn't realize how much I still depended on the nonverbal communications for clarity of speech until all the coping mechanisms I spent my life developing were then stripped from me. And so I started joining a bunch of online groups just so I could have naked face conversation, because I lived in Santa Monica, California at the time, and everybody had their face covered.
God, the worst place. The worst place to live.
It was the worst. I used to drive an hour and a half away to go for a hike with a friend just so that I could have naked face conversations and not be in fear of the police coming after me, because they would start with their megaphones on the beach. So if you didn't have your mask on, you were going to get hunted down. So I would go, almost 2 hours just to go for a hike. And I started the podcast because I was on all these Zoom groups, and people were seeing me post on social media. I was just trying to connect with people. And, instead of connecting, I got into lots of arguments. It was not the kind of connection I was seeking. It was not all that pleasant. And so, but some people had suggested that I start a podcast, and I knew nothing about podcasts. And then one person said, when they heard about my story, they said, "Yeah, you need to go on Rogan." And I said, "What's a Rogan? Why do I need to be on it?" I knew nothing about podcasts, but I started listening, and they actually ended up keeping me company. It became kind of I guess, like the way people would listen to television in the background and it's just on in the living room. It became kind of like that. It was a way to have some company since I didn't have anybody to talk to, because I couldn't understand people. I mean, even my close friends, if their faces were covered, I really had a really difficult time understanding them. So eventually I was like, well, I don't like the idea. The idea of starting the podcast terrified me. I had no interest. But then it dawned on me one day. I said, oh, I could have naked face conversations. This might save my life. I meant it kind of literally. And so I made a commitment for 6 months. I told people, I really was trying to get people in person. But the only rule was that you could not cover your face, and even, digitally or in person. And I told them that I might not air it, that it was really just for me. But after 6 months, they really enjoyed it. It did wonders for my morale. And so I started. And I aired the first one in January of 2021. So.
Right. And now, now you certainly know what a Rogan is.
Thank you.
So I have before we go to Pax Silica, sorry, but there's one question that really interests me since you are a lip reader. So English is my second language. My first language is German. And I'm interested in this. So for me, it's more difficult to speak English for several reasons. But one reason is that the movements you make, the muscles you use in your lips when you speak English, it's very different from speaking German. And although I've been living here for a long time, I still feel like it's a lot more effort saying the words in English. And when I get tired in particular, then it's much easier for me to speak German because it's just way more effortless. With just forming the words with my lips. So what I'm interested in is, can you, as a lip reader, can you tell from my lips how I move the lips whether that I'm not a native speaker?
I can. And so interestingly enough, my very first accent was British because I spent more time with my baby nurses who were from the British Islands. So it wasn't like a perfect British, it was, British Islands accent, but I was mimicking how they move their mouths. And it's so different than how my parents, my family, and, people,
Oh,
Americans did.
interesting.
So yeah, I typically can't. I'm not as good at it as I was when I was little, and I was really dependent on it then. But yeah, I still can tell.
So you can tell, you can look at someone, move their lips, and you can say, well, that's not a Native
Not
American.
American, yeah. Usually I can.
Usually you can. Can you go so far as to say, well, that's probably French or Norwegian or
Not usually. I could usually determine British because that was so familiar to me, but other languages, not necessarily. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
with enough exposure, you will probably be able to do that. Since you're able to do it with British English and American English, I mean, that's pretty amazing. All right. Well, but let's get back to the Pax Silica. And in fact, this is the first Pax that is not named after a geographic location, like Rome, like the British Empire, or like the American continent. So we had the Pax Romana, the Pax Britannica. And these periods were actually, they are all named Pax because they refer, and retrospectively, they refer to where we see, oh, well, these 300 years or so, they look like a pretty good time to have been alive. And maybe that's true, and maybe in some regions that wasn't even true. But it looks like there was a pretty good time to be alive. It was pretty stable, pretty peaceful. And also, yeah, I already said that happened after, it wasn't during the time that somebody declared. I mean, Emperor Augustus didn't declare that now the Pax Romana would begin. I think it was Edward Gibbon who, in his book, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire in 1776, I think he coined this phrase, Pax Romana. So more than 1,000 years later. But this Pax Silica is quite different. So first of all, it's not named after a location. Second of all, it's named right now. It hasn't even started yet. And who knows if there's ever going to be a Pax Silica, but we already got the label. We already got the historic label. And it's named after this chemical element that has the symbol Si and the atomic number 14. Yeah, and a little bit about this very important chemical element. It's a hard. It's kind of like a brittle, a blue-gray metalloid that sits between metals and non-metals on the periodic table, and that is what gives it its important qualities. The silicon is the second most abundant element in Earth's crust, so it's second only to oxygen. It's found everywhere. It's found in sand, for example, and which means it's inexpensive. It's stable at high temperatures, and it's really the fundamental building material of virtually every computer chip because it has these semiconducting properties. It's between the conductors like metals, copper, for example, and insulators like plastic. So it's a semiconductor. And that's so important because its conductivity can be very precisely controlled, which is necessary to build these many tiny switches that are inside these chips. So it's all about chips. Peace on earth rests on chips, apparently, these days. Who has the chips, has the say, and the power. And this Pax Silica is an initiative of the United States government that was launched in December 2025. So, Courtney, I'm going to turn it over to you now. What is behind this Pax Silica and what is its significance?
Oh, well, there's a lot of moving parts, but it is to build this new, as you were saying. So when we think Pax Americana, Pax Britannica, that's really, they label it as a time of peace, but it's really a time of hegemony, right? If you think about it. And what they're now presenting is that there's going to be essentially, I guess, a hegemonic period of silicon, which is kind of, when you think about it, yes, it is what runs these semiconductor chips. But, it's also when you start to think about people becoming kind of merging with silicon, right? That the technoplastic being, that was actually Nick Land's term for transhumanist. He called them technoplastic beings. I really like that term because I think it's very explicit. It kind of says it. It gives you the visual of what it actually is. But yeah, so this is building the entire infrastructure for the minerals, the energy, the factories, obviously the chips, the data centers, and I think one of the really important components is the money. I call it the cybernetic organism. And I know when I first say that to a lot of people, it sounds kind of overwhelming and like, what is she talking about? Cybernetic organism? It's not really all that complicated. So for people who are not familiar with cybernetics, this was Norbert Wiener's, it's essentially the theory and field, but essentially it's really just about feedback loops. And this has kind of been the plan, is to build a cybernetic organism where everything is, people are very familiar with like a social credit system. The social credit, people have an idea of like, there's some kind of puppet master who's deciding what's okay, what's not okay, and what's approved. And, you'll get demerits for some, bad behavior and rewarded for some, good behavior. But when you have this system that's being erected right now, it's really all done through smart contracts. So it's a system. And so the system, obviously, there's somebody coding the system and programming the system, but the system is just designed for permissions or for lockouts. And so everything is already kind of constructed beforehand. And this system that's being constructed right now, I think it has a couple of facets. One, I think it was designed to economically lock China out, because they need China because China has all the minerals for these chips. So they actually really need China. So I think that was one major component of it. But I think it's also what makes the tokenization possible. And that does seem to be where they're moving. If you hear people like Larry Fink and Howard Lutnick, they keep talking about how we can tokenize everything. And tokenization is the conduit for this cybernetic organism, which would be, like a social credit system, but it's a conditionally based income, which is what you would be, so you'd have tokens. So I like to explain to people kind of like a video game. This makes it really tangible for people. And I think we've been really conditioned for this. I mean, people have all these like fitness trackers. I'm not, chastising people for having a fitness tracker. Although it's worth noting that, RFK Jr. said that by the end of 4 years, he'd like every American to be equipped with a wearable. And again, I don't think there's any problem with people having a wearable. That's their choice. And, people can make great lifestyle changes as a result of having their own data. But why does he think it's so important? Well, he explicitly said that MAHA, which is Make America Healthy Again, and I think as a label, just as an acronym, that's really incontrovertible. Who doesn't want to make America healthy again? I'm all in favor of a lot of the headlines. Let's get rid of seed oils. Let's get rid of all these toxic kind of food coloring. I don't have a problem with any of that. Maybe let's start integrating some more holistic kind of healing as opposed to just all the big pharma push. These things all sound great. But he said that MAHA was explicitly MABA. And he said MABA is a huge part of MAHA. And MABA is the acronym for Make America Biotech Accelerate. And so I couldn't believe he actually used the term accelerate in the acronym, because accelerate is a derivative of accelerationism. So those if we're not familiar with accelerationism, it could kind of be summarized by the Zuckerberg quote, we have to move fast and break things. And if not, we're not breaking things, we're not moving fast enough. There's a lot more, there's left accelerationism, there's right accelerationism. Nick Land is seen as the father of both, and he kind of scoffs at both of them. He says they suffer from human delusionalism, and he believes in unconditional accelerationism. But all that aside, you have to remember he's the one who's famous for saying that nothing human makes it out of the near future. So that's kind of where his head is at. But yeah, so you've got the MABA, And these wearables, I think, have kind of primed people. I mean, it's just one example, but I think it's a great example because I think a lot of people can really relate to it. But you've got these wearables, and then on the wearables, you have these apps, and then you can, connect with friends or connect with communities, and you can have little competitions. And some of them you can even make money. And I think the reason why I think this is a great example to prime people is because it's kind of priming people for having tokens in, a gamified society, part of a cybernetic organism. So, with these wearables, like you getting a certain amount of steps that day, you get rewarded. Maybe you get some tokens. You go below the threshold and now you get some tokens taken away. This all seemed pretty benign when you look at it that way. But what happens when the entire economic infrastructure is run that way? Then it becomes your money becomes part of your, permissions allotment. So whatever the system decides is acceptable will be passed, and whatever decides is not will not be. And so you might not even have access to your own tokens. So I think that's kind of where this is all going, and I think that that's part of why they're pushing this Clarity Act so hard.
And also these games, even with where you collect tokens on your fitness tracker and maybe get some rewards and trophies and prizes, um, even that is not nearly as benign as it seems, because they give you all these it's like bread and games for the plebs, right? You
Mhm.
give them that so that they participate and share enormous amounts of their own data, and
Yes.
that data is being sold to everyone who is interested, and that was not legally prevented. That could have been prevented. Congress could have said absolutely no, this is not legal that anybody sells these data. It didn't happen, and of course the government can buy the data, can access it, can do with the data whatever they want. So this is just some sort of how are we going to get people to share their physical data about their whatever blood pressure, heart rate, how, how often how fast they can run, all sorts of data points. Well, it's very easy. You just invent some. You appeal to the competitiveness of people, and wanting to count their steps. That's very appealing to many people. Track how they get better, compare it with others. Um, that was psychologically a very clever idea, and it worked beautifully. There are just huge amounts of data now available about Americans, physical about their physical data.
Biometric, yeah,
And
absolutely.
the other thing you said, you talked about Pax Silica creating a programmed system. That's what it's all about. And you were right pointing out that all these paxes are systems of hegemony. So it was the Roman Empire,
Yeah.
pretty brutal Roman Empire. Um, that was the Pax Romana, and then you had the Pax Britannica. So it's a hegemonic system. And for the first time, this is a program system, because the others couldn't be programmed. It wasn't technically possible. Otherwise,
Yeah.
they probably would have been as well, but wasn't possible. So now we have the first program system, and the Silica is the one that makes the programming possible, because being a semiconductor, it has the capacity to switch. It's like a gate. It's like you open the gate or you close the gate, and
Yeah.
having something like that opens or closes a gate is all you need in order to program people and to actually rule the world and to rule people.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
was thinking, I'm going to share Catherine Austin Fitts. She has this expression of 2 logs versus 3 log systems. And she created a graph that I would quickly share, and we can look at that, because it beautifully demonstrates what this means
Mhm.
in praxis, and how it changes life on a fundamental level in every single regard. So here you see the graph that I talked about, programmable money. On the left, she has the graph for a traditional transaction between two human beings, let's say, or corporations. Here, for example, you have a buyer and you have a seller, And each of them has a lock, and they can open the lock or they can close the lock. So the buyer can decide to buy or not to buy, and the seller can decide to sell or not to sell. And when the conditions are correct for both the buyer and the seller, the locks will open on both sides. They will say, yeah, that's a good price. The buyer will say, and the seller will say, okay, that price is okay for me. I can make some profit with that. And then they will exchange some goods. Very simple. That's the way it has always been in history. And now the new transaction is a 3-lock transaction. And that's only possible because of silicon. What you have is in the middle, so you have the buyer and the seller as usual, but in the middle you have a dynamic complex algorithm that is governed by little gates that open or close like little switches. And the whole thing is digital, of course, and it's executed if it happens, if any kind of selling or whatever it is takes place, it's executed on a distributed ledger and recorded. And the third lock can be automatic. I mean, it can be a manual third lock, but what she is talking about here is the danger of the automatic digital third lock that is programmed. That is programmed according to an algorithm that can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. And that completely upsets this very simple transaction here on the left, because now what governs and overrides the locks of the seller and the buyer is the lock in the middle. The lock in the middle might not have any switches at all, and then everything is fine. But it might have all sorts of complicated conditions. And no matter whether the buyer's lock and the seller's locks are open, the seller wants to sell, the buyer wants to buy, but the dynamic complex algorithm says, no, there's something wrong here. And maybe there are 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 things wrong. I'm not going to give the okay. Then it's not going to happen.
Yeah. The distributed ledger is essentially kind of like a choke point.
And that just completely changes the entire game. Now, the Pax Silica is really rests on this, if I understand that correctly, right? Or it allows this kind of system to be developed, and it's a control system. It's just the most sophisticated control system that has ever existed, as far as I can tell.
That's how it looks to me. I mean, it would control everything, because the entire like all of the trade, the economy, everything would be controlled digitally.
Yes, and the more data you have, the finer the control can be. So let's say, for example, the buyer wants to buy a hamburger. The seller is perfectly happy. The buyer accepts the price, no problem. But the complex algorithm in the middle says, hey, no, wait a minute. I can see that on your Fitbit, you didn't walk your 10,000 steps today. And no way you're going to eat a hamburger now. And you have to go and walk another mile before I'm going to give you the okay to buy the burger. You know, whatever the data they have, the masses of data, whatever their social goals are, whatever their hegemonic goals are, they can program them in there, and they can change that anytime, any way they wish.
Exactly. Yep.
It's absolutely terrifying.
Yes. Yes. I think so. And this is why the big push for the data centers, right? Because they need the data in order to feed all of this. This is completely hinging on the data center. So that is kind of a linchpin that people can push back against. I think that's where people do have some agency. They need all this data in order to be able to, I mean, you just think about like a good example, kind of a microcosm example, although it's, not small at all, but would be Amazon, right? So Amazon, it uses this kind of a system where everything is done digitally. They have all of the, rails and everything are GPS tracked, and all the everything is tracked, right? And everything is controlled through the digital infrastructure, and they use AI. So that's a great example. But now if you were to shut down some of the Amazon centers, you would start to poke holes, or you were to block off access to their data, then they wouldn't be able to run the way that they run. So that's a much smaller scale, obviously, but I think it might give people a sense of how important it is to push back against some of these data centers, because that's what it's all hinging upon.
Yes, you're absolutely right to point out the data centers, because you can already see you need massive amounts of data. And
Yes.
that's the only reason why you need massive numbers of data centers. It's numbers
Yes.
that no other country in the world, even with like much larger populations, has, like India and China. That's the
Yeah.
only reason. There is no other explanation. It's not to do the kind of stuff that we are already doing now. You don't need those
You
gigantic data
don't
centers for it.
No, you don't need the data centers to do. You don't need data centers for the LLMs that we use. For all the
No.
stuff we're using, we're already doing it without the data centers. So the data centers are to power this ginormous system.
And
That's
isn't it interesting how, AI, it's still so new. The development of AI has been so fast, so absolutely overwhelmingly fast over these last years. We are not even at any point where we can say how dangerous is it. We know there are all sorts of dangers with AI. We don't really understand what's happening in these black box LLM models. There are so many things that are totally unclear, and many people who don't know that much about AI have absolutely no clue about that. We don't even know so many things. Does it really make sense to invest huge amounts of money, as so many companies do right now, and ask your software engineers to do all sorts of vape coding, and then ask some other poor colleague to look over the whole thing and try to debug it and make sense of it. Does that even make any sense? Does that improve the code? Do we even have any way of finding out whether that improves the code? What kind of disastrous mistakes might be lurking? There are so many questions. But what we are honing in on is the way that this can be used to control people.
Yeah. The AI itself is not the problem. I mean, yes, obviously there's a lot we don't know. But it's a tool, and I mean, tools can be useful as long as they're being used as a tool. The big problem is when we start outsourcing everything to the tool, then we no longer have control over the tool. I watched a video last night, actually, that Patrick sent me, and it was very, very interesting. It's something I've thought quite a bit about. It's how they were going through some studies on how mostly with children using these AI tools and what it was doing to their cognition. But then they also looked at some studies with adults. And what was very interesting is that there were two ends of the spectrum. Most people think like, oh, AI will just dumb you down. And for a lot of people does, because and this is something I've been saying for a very long time, they outsource their cognition to the AI. So obviously with anything, you use it or lose it, right? If you're no longer thinking, your capacity for critical thinking diminishes. But there was also people whose capacity increased, and it was because they were using it as a tool. So they weren't just trusting the AI blindly. They were questioning it, interrogating it, using it back and forth, and actually sharpened and refined their critical thinking skills. I bring this up because this is how it will take over the control. We're looking at, my issue isn't whether or not the tool is good or bad. My issue is whether or not it can lend itself to a technocratic or transhuman world. And what they're looking at doing with things like the Pax Silica is where the AI will control everything. Right now, we're seeing this even with the military. They're talking about making human decisions deferred to, autonomous AI tools.
Which
This
is
becomes
insane.
Which is
Absolutely insane.
insane, right? This is where it
Mhm.
becomes really problematic, because we have to think about, it's not just, a lot of people say, oh, well, it's about who controls the AI, like who's programming it. And I'm not saying that that's not a factor, but it's always exponential of the input. And we don't know exactly how that will manifest, right? Because it becomes recursive, it builds on itself. So you could have somebody who has the most benevolent, here's a totally other point of view as well. You could have somebody who they have a really benevolent point of view from their perspective when they're programming it. But who's to say that that's benevolent to you or to me, right? It's like Ben Goertzel does the AI for good. He partnered with the World Economic Forum and the UN. I don't know about you, but Ben Goertzel and I probably don't have the same moral code. Our idea of what ethics are probably differ. And so do I want him designing what all the ethics that AI should be using would be
No.
following? I don't. But that's what they're doing, actually. Right now, in 2024, they created something called the Participatory Framework for a Global AGI, Participatory Framework for a Global AGI Constitution. And so they have, and this is Mariana Bozeman, who's a member of the Club of Rome, Annalise Smithsman, who founded Earthwise. She's also kind of affiliated with this group, or kind of concept. It's called Game B. I've covered that quite extensively. And then Ben Goertzel, who's partners with the Hanson Robotics, created the Sophia robot, and then of course the AI for Good. And then the other one is Laura George, who is one of the heads of Oracle Institute. And they've come together to create this. And what they've said is that we have to parent the AGI so that it grows up to be benevolent because they think it will become sentient. I don't personally believe that, but that's the narrative, and it has a lot of power, that narrative. And so they have said that they need to parent it so it becomes benevolent, and that eventually we, the humans, may need to be subordinate to the AGI because it will have better ethics than we do, because they've trained it to be benevolent. So of course they're really referring to, the Gaia worship, that it will take care of the planet better than we do, because of course we're the corruptors and polluters of the planet. But people should know the entire Sustainable Development Goals are not about planetary goodness and stewardship. They're really all about social impact finance. That's what they're about. So it's controlling all the world's resources, including us as human capital. And this kind of a infrastructure like Pax Silica makes that possible. And it makes it possible. What people need to understand, because I think a lot of times people think about things in terms of they're always looking for the they. And there are some actors we can point fingers to, but a lot of this is like converging interests. And so you don't actually need like a secret cabal, because if you just look at like the countries that are involved, I mean, there's obviously the U.S. It's a U.S.-led initiative. Then we've got Australia, Finland, Greece, India, Israel, Japan, Netherlands, who coordinates heavily. They're one of the primary tech partners. By the way, you don't hear people complaining about them, but they're like one of the big tech partners. Norway, Philippines. Philippines is actually where they're creating an economic special zone, so kind of like a network state type of apparatus, in order to bypass China if they need for the development of these chips and whatnot. Then they've got Qatar, obviously, Singapore, South Korea, Sweden, the UAE, and United Kingdom. Those are who are involved as of right now. So, and you've got some other who are participants but not signatory at this moment. So you've got Taiwan, who is a critical signatory. Canada, they call them an observer. The European Union also has observer status. Although there are some individual nations in the EU who have signed on. So, I mean, this is a pretty massive collaboration. They're all obviously convening because there's mutual interests involved, right?
I would like to have a look at the actual declaration, so that it's a short declaration. It's just like, I don't know, a page and a half or so. So we can have a look at that and the wording. It's very interesting. But before we do that, I just wanted to make one remark. You said earlier that about the data centers, that there is opportunity for pushback because
Yes.
many, many people are very upset about this massive building of absolutely huge data centers all over the country. But the pushback, the pushback is going to become more dangerous, I believe. I mean, you can see that there was this executive order some time ago. I don't know exactly when, about the data centers, that they are part of the national security infrastructure, something like that. Do you remember? So that the data centers are regarded as part of
Oh yeah,
national defense, national
yeah,
security.
they are. Yeah.
So which means that if you protest a data center, then then very likely you will be regarded as some sort of domestic
Well,
terrorist.
they already
You
have
know,
domestic, don't they have like the AI extremists as part of the domestic extremist
oh,
category? They already have that. They have a bill for that. I don't know if it's a bill, but they have already declared like AI, uh, naysayers as yes, I'll have to look up what they actually called it, but there is a category of the domestic extremists already.
right,
Um,
right.
but what I would just advise people while you're looking that up, I would just say that, this isn't about violent revolution. There's so many things people can do that don't involve like going into data centers and, I'm not advocating this, but like, causing violence of any kind. Because I hear people say, oh, we should blow up the data centers. Like, that's not what I'm recommending. But you can put a lot of pressure locally on your representatives to defund them, right? Or to put some sort of sanctuaries where that zone cannot be used. There's a lot of things people can do in that regard. And I would advise, I know people say like the political system is useless and they've given up. But I would really encourage people to use it in this regard, because we've seen that in some cases it's already been successful, where the people have won in their local areas in pushing back against some data centers. So I think that that's what people should be doing. I don't think they should be putting themselves in a position where they're going to be, arrested and whatnot.
Okay, so now I'm going to share the text of this declaration.
I just wanted to tell you that the name is they're called the anti-tech extremists, and it was the FBI. They did put it into federal law, so it's called the anti-tech extremists.
Oh, the anti-tech. Those are the modern Luddites. The anti-tech extremists.
Yes.
All right.
The FBI, Department of Homeland Security have tracked a spike in anti-tech sentiment. Intelligence reports warn that backlash against the rapid build-out of massive energy-consuming data centers could escalate into civil unrest or violent anti-tech activity. So the thing about these data centers is some of them already, so talking about the environment, quote unquote, right? Some of them violate the Clean Air Act. In fact, the one in our state, Colossus, that's in Memphis, Tennessee. That's Elon's data center, and
The thing
that
is
one
called Colossus.
is
They
called
call it
Colossus.
Colossus. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And I've been. It's ginormous. The methane gas turbines are it's like a block long. It is massive. Maybe multiple blocks. It's really massive. It's hard to even take it all in one like visual span. But yeah, it's in violation of the Clean Air Act. It's already been in violation, and so they claim that the tech is going to be quote unquote green and help save the planet. Notice that Davos has pivoted. They don't talk about climate change. They're talking about AI. And it's because the AI is in no way beneficial to the environment. So, of course, a lot of that narrative around the climate crisis we know was propaganda. The Club of Rome admitted it in their Global Revolution document in 1992. So they claimed in 1972, in the Limits of Growth, that that they needed this common enemy. So of course the enemy of humanity is man himself, because he's the polluter and destroys the planet. And then in the 1992 document they said that it was because they needed a common enemy. So they basically admitted it was propaganda, because they couldn't get people to rally behind this narrative otherwise. And so while we know that that was falsified propaganda for a specific purpose, there is something to be said for the fact that these data centers are devastating for the local environments. They are creating incredible toxic air, pollution. They're using up their water sources. They
Hmm.
have to use clean drinking water because otherwise it would breed bacteria and be corrosive. And so these huge part of the reason they want Greenland is because it's cold there. So they don't need as much to cool it. But they need the water, in other areas where, it's not as cold. They still need it in Greenland, but not to the same degree. Um, so I mean, that's a very valid point that a lot of people are making, is that this is, impeding in their direct environmental space, and it's having a direct impact on their health. So I think people can certainly raise those concerns. And I wrote an article called "Move the Meter" on my Substack about the narrative, and how people were told like they should take less shower to save water, but essentially they're being sold this narrative about the closed loop versus the open loop. Both are using water, and both are causing major pollution. They have different mechanisms, and I won't go into the entire detail. They can go look at the articles. That might take a while to break down all the science for people. But yeah, it's these are very valid concerns that people can raise, and I think they should.
Oh, absolutely. And they do. And they
Yeah.
do. And they are
Yes,
not
they
only
are.
raising these concerns, they are suing. So there are all sorts of interesting developments and real dramas playing out in real life right now, um, around these data centers. For
Yep.
example, there's one in Missouri, near Jefferson. What is it called? In Jefferson County,
Uh-huh.
where the entire city council was dumped in the local election, and then they did a recall election, and the mayor was recalled, and the other city council members were recalled, and they are now suing I think they're suing the city, or
Yep.
they are suing left and right, and they are being sued back. But there is it's a real fight. It's fascinating.
It is.
Um,
Yeah.
so, and very, very good to closely watch that and see what you can learn from it. I hope to interview one of the women who is right in the middle of this fight, and
Yeah.
who helped organize the recall election and then the lawsuit, etc.
Well, that would
So
be
because
great.
yeah, exactly, because there's so much the problems. She is so busy with the drama that is going on there. She doesn't have time for an interview, but eventually she will, and there will be so much to learn from her and people like her. And it's very, very
Absolutely.
important knowledge. But right now, here's the Pax Silica thing. You can see it's on the State.gov. So this
State.gov. Yeah.
from the government. Um, and it says, so they have this quote here from a person, actually
Uh-huh.
quite a fascinating person, this Jacob Helberg. He says, if the 20th century ran on oil and steel, the 21st century runs on compute and the minerals that feed it. This historic declaration, of course, it's a historic declaration, hails, oh wow, what a word, hails a new economic security consensus, ensuring aligned partners build the AI ecosystem of tomorrow, from energy and critical minerals to high-end manufacturing and models. So that's the thing. I guess they think of sentences like this, or little bits of. They think of it as some sort of poetry or something, or putting people
Yes.
to sleep, or what is this?
It's
Um,
definitely propaganda, right? I actually
Absolute
listened.
propaganda. Yes.
Yes. And it goes along with the whole "Make America Great." We're building American supremacy. They're trying to hang on to that narrative. I actually listened to a speech with Jacob Helberg talking about Pax Silica, and it was very, not even the content itself, but just listening to his delivery felt very performative, and it almost felt like he kind of knew that he was lying about a lot of things. I felt like he hedged quite a bit. It was interesting to listen to.
Hmm.
I don't remember what the
Hmm.
title of it was. I think it was just Pax Silica. And it was when they were first announcing it, and I listened to that whole thing, and it was not very informative, quite honestly, because it was so much messaging. It was really about selling it. It was like watching an infomercial rather than actually hearing. And people did ask a lot of questions, but even those he really danced around, from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, you the last thing
So,
you want it to be is truly informing, because that would scare everybody off. So you have
right.
to you have to cover it in this kind of schmaltzy thick surface that nobody's able. You're drowning in this sugary stuff on top.
Well, but it's an extension of exactly what Trump said. Remember in his AI stack he talked about in the what was that, the he had like the 3 pillars in his AI stack, and he said in the 3rd pillar he talks about how the stack would be exported to the world. So essentially he was talking about creating the American technique that would be the rest of the world, we would export to the rest of the world. That sounds like what this Pax Silica is.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the only way you control the rest of the world. You have to export it. You can't keep it for yourself. You have to
Yes.
export it, but you have to stay in control of it.
But the
By the way, what?
irony,
Mhm.
sorry, what were you
Go
going to
ahead.
say?
No. Go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just going to say the irony is that while this is an American initiative, so much of the money is coming from the Middle East. And so it's almost like this weird kind of like loop, because if you think about like the old euro dollar, when people hear euro dollar, they typically think of like EU dollars. That's not what I mean. I mean, it was created in 1957. So there was like offshore dollars essentially. And so the offshore dollars were a mechanism. It was really because the Russians wanted to have they wanted to have American money, but they were afraid that the American government would seize it because of the Cold War. And so they put it into euro dollars, like HSBC, right? So it was technically under the jurisdiction of, England, but they could still have American money. And so
That was a good idea.
what?
That was a good idea.
Well, strategically,
Yeah.
strategically,
Yes.
but
For that. Yes.
yeah, right, strategically. But when you look at historically, the Gulf states have actually always like their surplus kind of feeds it. Because they have put money into the
Mhm.
offshore dollars to buy the treasuries, right? And so it's kind of like what they're doing now, but now the digital infrastructure becomes the new, uh, it becomes a new euro dollar, offshore dollar, but becomes a digital tracking, surveilling. So it's like it becomes the control mechanism for that, which was supposed to be the escape. So it's almost like the escape becomes a leash, if you think of it that way. But it is a very interesting thing when you look at it from a power play, because the money is coming from like the money is almost being cycled as a loop. But right now, the surplus is actually coming from the Gulf states. But then the infrastructure is, or at least the architecture is coming from the US.
So when you say the escape becomes a leash, what
Yeah.
exactly do you mean? So the escape is they invest the money into the system that builds uh that builds this
Well,
new.
the idea of the Eurodollar was for it to be like an escape route, right?
Right. Right.
From possible seizure. So it was for being seized, right? Being controlled. So
Hmm.
that was the escape. But now it becomes a leash through the digital infrastructure, because that's
Right.
right. That's where the money is coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And
So
it says here the 21st century runs on compute, no longer on oil and steel and the minerals that feed it. Of course, I mean, that is nonsense, because the 21st century also runs on oil and steel and on natural gas and on
what powers the compute?
exactly what powers the compute. And we have seen and we have seen that just now really beautifully in this Iran war. That was a huge, in my opinion, huge mistake and a huge miscalculation, because they didn't understand that if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, then there is no more oil and there is no more natural gas, or not enough to
Well,
run
they're
the
creating all
compute.
these alternative routes, right? So they've got like the IMEC route. They've got the port of the Alpha port. They have what is the International North-South, I forgot what it's called, but it's basically the India, Russia, Iran. No, it's Iran, Russia. I forgot what the other one is, but that rail is going through, and then they have one that's going through Damascus, I believe. There's 3, but
Right.
two of them bypass Haifa. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, but they weren't ready for. I mean, IMAC isn't ready yet. They were in no way ready for.
No, and the
for it.
Alpha port has been slated, but it's not contracted to start building till 2028.
Well, so
It's been
this is,
slated.
but back to this course. So that was Jacob
Yeah.
Helberg, and he is the Undersecretary for Economic Affairs. And maybe before we have a quick look at the Pax Silica Declaration itself, let's have a look at who he is, because many people don't know him. All right, so here we go. This is
Okay.
Jacob Helberg, and oh well, so he must be French. He must have two citizenships, French and American. He went to the Lycée Français Jean Monnet. So he's a young guy. 2008, was a visiting student at Harvard, and then did a BA at the Elliott School of International Affairs. And then he did a Master of Science in Cybersecurity Risk and Strategy at NYU. I don't know when. He didn't put in a year there. And when you look at his, that's the way he looks, by the way. He kind of looks like he's made out of silicon.
What are we looking at?
We're looking at a picture of Jacob Helberg.
Oh, and he looks like a picture of silicon.
Yeah, he looks very like a what did you call these things? These plastotechnic beings or something?
Yeah, technoplastic beings.
Oh, sorry, other way around. Technoplastic beings. Yeah, he looks a bit like a technoplastic being.
That's Nick Bland's term. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yes. But he has a very, very interesting career. So he's a young guy. He must be in his like mid-30s, maybe. And I'm looking at I'm looking at his LinkedIn profile now. He started off doing some Haiti initiative, Heal Haiti initiative, all the way back in 2010, and then International Youth Council, became or worked for California State Assembly as a campaign consultant, so got into from the beginning, in kind of politics. Then he worked as a research associate at the Avenue Pacific. And then in 2016, he became a policy advisor for global policies and standards for Google. Did that for 3 years, a bit more. And then he went to CSIS, this very influential think tank, CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Studies. Stayed for 2 years, then became a senior advisor at Stanford. Mm-hmm. So he's going from a corporation, from one of the really big tech corporations to very influential Washington, D.C. Think tank CSIS, which has all sorts of government connections and connections to the intelligence agencies. From there, he goes to academia, Stanford University, senior advisor, Center on Geopolitics and Technology. He rotates through all these doors, spends a few years here, there. After that, he went to the Brookings Institution, another highly influential think tank, and stayed for 3 years. And there he did something very interesting. He was the co-chair of the US-France Working on China group, and he was the co-chair of the China Strategy Initiative Working Group.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. And then he became the commissioner of the US-China Economic and Security Review Commission. So still China. That was January 2023 to December 2024. So for 2 years. And then he went back to the corporation. He went to Palantir. Well, I mean, Palantir is, I mean, don't even know if it can, 50% of its business is government. So he was the senior. Now listen to that wasn't just some position at Palantir. He became the senior advisor to the CEO, to Alex Karp, right? Palantir Technologies, 2023 to May 2025. He also became a Palantir, a fellow at the Palantir Foundation. Not sure what the significance of that is, but I'm sure it's significant. From there, he switched to the Center for a New American Security, CNAS, became a senior adjunct fellow, and stayed there for 3 years. That, by the way, that overlaps with I think that overlaps at least partially. Yes, overlaps partially with the work at Palantir and being a fellow at the Palantir Foundation. So he's doing these things at the same time. And then he was appointed Undersecretary of State in October 2025. So we already see this emphasis here on China. So this is the guy. He is the guy who apparently played an important role behind the Pax Silica declaration. And I'm going back to that now, so we can have a look at the text. And as I said, the text is very brief. It's just like 2 pages.
Yeah.
And if you just read this thing, I don't know, you probably have no idea what they're talking about and what this is even about. It's just, it's all about AI, and it's all about transforming the world with AI, and it's going to be just wonderful. But let's have a look at some of the text. So you already listed all the countries that joined this Pax Silica as signatories, and that this is the "we" refers to all these countries. So we affirm our shared commitment to advance mutual prosperity, technological progress, and economic securities for our peoples. Well, I mean, I almost fell off the chair when I read that. And you know why?
Why?
It's for our peoples.
For our people.
Heck? What
Yes.
the heck? I mean, this is so, well, first of all, we are not their peoples. And for our peoples, it's so, I don't know, maybe I have an exaggerated reaction to that, but
Well,
I find that
no, I
so
think that's
patronizing and so arrogant, just like some royal king looking down at his peoples.
well, I think even more than that, it's really significant because people are not part of this equation. Because people have become nodes, right? We're just nodes for that infrastructure. We're not right now. People. I mean, the way I think of people is, we're imago Dei, made in the image of God. We have free will. We have certain unalienable rights, right? So this is coming from. It's an American initiative, right? So if you think about, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but this is coming from America. So if we're going to make an initiative, it should be aligned with the Constitution, right? That would be what you would expect or hope for, at least. And of course, I think that's what people thought when we heard MAGA, Make America Great Again. I think people thought we might get something that would be more akin to a, constitutional restoration. And as Patrick and I wrote, it was called The Final Betrayal because it was completely the opposite of that. At least that's how it looks. But when you think about the Constitution, it's predicated on the metaphysics that were stipulated in the Declaration of Independence. Now, most people are familiar with this preamble that says, we are all created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Inherent in that is that there is a Creator. We are not Him. We are not the Creator. That there is a Creator-creation distinction, and that there are certain unalienable rights. And those rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And for the pursuit of happiness, this is something I do harp on quite a bit because I think it's really important and we're really not taught. The founders arguably kind of reached around Locke because Locke would talk about estate and property. And in the Pax Silica video, we did a video on the difference between private property and sovereign property. And this is a very important concept because pursuit of happiness is derived from the Aristotelian concept of eudaimonia, which is human flourishing towards virtue. And it becomes encompassed in that is this idea of articaria, which means self-sufficiency for the home. So yes, in that is private property, but it's specifically oriented. It's got a specific telos, an end purpose. And private property, it's this Lockean contractarian concept. It's all about contracts. And so this becomes very important. I'm not just waxing poetic about ancient philosophy here. There is a real relevant purpose to all of this. When you start to think about contractarian principles and legal private property, you can legally sell yourself into slavery. But if you think of yourself as a imago Dei and you think about sovereign property, you can't because you didn't give yourself. It's not yours to give away. Does that make sense?
Well,
So that's a very simple way to put it. But,
that's a very interesting distinction. So as a
and
sovereign individual, you cannot sell yourself
you
into
cannot sell
slavery.
yourself because you didn't give yourself. And so it's not yours to give. And so this becomes very, very important when we start to think about infrastructures like this because they're not considering the human being. They're considering a raw material that can be molded like clay and silica, right? We can be molded, constructed. We can be useful nodes to benefit a data collecting machine, a cybernetic organism. That's why I like to use that term because it's once you get it, it paints the whole picture. But that's not a human being. A human being has sovereignty. A human being has free will. A human being has agency. A human being is wired for virtue. That is our telos. And so this contractarian kind of a philosophy principle, it becomes very relevant because it's now going to be exacerbated exponentially on steroids by smart contracts. So the smart contracts now dictate everything. And remember, the smart contract, once it's coded, I mean, it's difficult enough to negotiate with a person, right? I like to use the example of the reason why estate lawyers exist is because you think you could share property with loved ones and family. But estate lawyers exist for a reason because it's not always so, neat and packed. Sometimes it becomes quite messy. And that's human beings, but human beings, at least you can deal with and negotiate, at least attempt to, and come to some sort of resolve because you have two agent entities. But when you're dealing with smart contract, once that contract is put in place, it's just based on permissions. So everybody has had the experience. I shouldn't say everybody. Most people have the experience when they're dealing with social media or, an app or their portal for the doctor, all these various mechanisms where if they don't, if they violate the terms and services in some way, they just get locked out. If they don't enter, right, they don't enter enough information, they don't get through, they don't get any further, or they get locked out. And this is what is being constructed on a mass scale. So that's what people need to understand. And that takes out, I bring this all back to when you're talking about the human beings, right? It's for you, the people. Actually, we, the people, have been completely taken out. Did you vote for Pax Silica? I don't remember voting for Pax Silica.
I certainly didn't.
This wasn't on my list. So
yes.
And I don't think how it considers us. Yeah.
And these third locks, the smart contracts, they are peppered with these third locks that we looked at earlier. They are just, you can put as many third locks in there or as many little gateways that have to open and close. And all these things, all these smart, namely programmable things in this third lock, all they do is they take your inalienable rights away from you. In other words, they are no longer inalienable. They alienate yourself from your inalienable rights. They're gone,
Yeah.
Inalienable? You bet. No, they're absolutely alienable, and it's very easy with this kind of technology. So then but of course that's what they do. They write these grand declarations, and the only justification they can come up with, as always, or the only pretense, is to say, well, we are doing it for you, our dear beloved peoples. Well, then for our peoples. But I just thought that sounded so unbelievably condescending and also so stupid, because don't they know, the people who, like Jacob Helberg, I'm sure he knows that there are many, many people, in particular young people, who absolutely fear AI, who know that there is a good chance that they will lose their job because of AI. There are so many young people in like content creation, for example, that have already lost their jobs to AI. There are many software engineers who fear for their jobs, or whose jobs have already been destroyed. And so to pretend that it's all roses and apple pie, it's just so dishonest and so disgusting. So I just
Yeah.
want to read a couple of sentences here from this declaration. If I scroll down, you can
Yeah.
see that's it. That it's very short. There's not much text here at all. So they say here at the top, we recognize that a reliable supply chain is indispensable to our mutual economic security. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Then we also recognize that artificial intelligence represents a transformative force for our long-term prosperity, and that trustworthy systems are essential to safeguarding our mutual security and prosperity. So, trustworthy systems. Now, what's a trustworthy system, right?
So trust, typically when you think of it, this is kind of polysemic because so polysemic is like a word that has two meanings. So for most people, when they think about trust, they think about something that is earned, like in a relationship. You and I build a rapport, we trust each other, and that is built over time based on behavior. And so that's typically what we think of as trust. But trust, when you start talking about technology, especially in a technocratic system, it now becomes a measured node, right? It becomes a measurement. So trust is things that have been approved according to the smart contract, essentially, whatever metrics have been set. That becomes the trustworthy. They're now deciding what's trustworthy.
So they're saying, yeah, we need trustworthy systems to have these reliable, that run these reliable supply chains. And then they go on, and it's probably Jacob Helberg who wrote this, maybe with his staff together, and then had it approved, of course. So and then they write, we recognize that the technological revolution in AI is accelerating, increasingly reorganizing the world economy and reshaping global supply chains. Now, that's a really interesting sentence, right? Okay, so AI is accelerating. It's already incredibly fast, but they say
Yeah.
it is accelerating. It's developing even faster and faster and faster and faster. And
Yeah.
that means it's by accelerating more and more, it's increasingly, so also acceleratingly reorganizing the world economy.
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay, really? Okay, interesting. And it is also reshaping global supply chains.
It is, but I think it's accurate. What these rails are all digital. It's not just when we say like the road or the railway, or the shipping path. This is not of decades ago. This is now all tracked, metered, monitored, and AI dictated. So what can pass through, what can't. This is all being run through AI. That's why I use the example of Amazon, because I think that that's a really good kind of model for people to think about. It's similar, not the same, obviously, and this is much more. This is the next step, not much next level. But it is, yeah, that's very much what they're
And
doing.
that in the next sentence, he actually says the words, because so for now, he has only talked about global supply chains.
Mm-hmm.
But now he says, we believe that economic value and growth will flow through and across all levels of the global AI supply chain.
Yep.
Right? Now, that's something very different from a global supply chain. Now it's a global AI supply chain.
Yep.
driving historic opportunity and demand for energy, critical minerals, manufacturing, technological hardware, infrastructure, and new markets not yet invented. So it's like a mad gold rush. It's like a mad AI
Yeah,
rush
that's
building
the
this.
that's the analogy that I like to use, is to think about, when we would go out in America, like going out west, it was the rails that enabled that expansion, right? But the big difference is, again, the people. That was about humans being able to travel and to be able to, you could have businesses now that could grow because you could transport product, right? But this still involved individuals. This involved human beings. But now we're talking about something that is completely digital run, and so much of uh, the growth and the yield is actually coming from a digital infrastructure, and the human is becomes a node as opposed to, the agent.
And now, so it's all we, but it's we must not forget that this is a United States initiative, and then these other countries co-sign. So it's really the United States, and then with these trusted partners that were willing to sign on to this and want to be part of it. But it is driven by the United States. That's I think that's essential to keep that in
Sure.
mind. So he says, well, they allegedly
The we.
said, yes. In this spirit, we declare our shared vision to deepen our economic partnership through shared efforts on investment, security practices, infrastructure, and incentives. And then I don't want to read all of this. Let me see. They say here, yes, let's go to this. This is, it's all interesting, but let's jump to this sentence here. We support the promotion of a shared and trusted ecosystem of AI developers and vendors to renew legacy industries and unlock new markets and services for the lasting prosperity of our peoples, who might all lose their jobs. Um, that's not in there, of course. They just say for the lasting prosperity of our peoples. But this first part of the sentence, we support the promotion of a shared and trusted ecosystem of AI developers and vendors. Wow, what is that? So they're going to build an ecosystem of AI developers, so trusted. You have to get into that trusted club as an AI developer and vendor. Otherwise, you are out, and forget about
So
earning money.
I'm just looking up because I actually don't know like who all of the shared trusted AI developers and vendors are. So I just did a quick search, and this is just a very cursory search, but this global AI integrators and enterprise software, and they put India is a massive tech sector considered the engine for the legal renewal under the pact. Their role, India is IT giants such as Tata Consultancy Services, Infosys, and HCLT Tech act as the HCL Tech act as the premier global integrators. They write the custom enterprise AI software required to modernize older Western factory supply chains and legacy databases. And their goal is to replace the legacy systems with AI frameworks that run entirely on quote unquote trusted non-Chinese cloud networks. Remember, this whole thing is about locking China out. And that's not an interpretive. I mean, when you do just like a quick search, it says the whole purpose was an economic, route around China. Robotics and industrial automation is the United States. The United States anchors the high-end software development, cloud infrastructure, frontier AI models. The role is big tech providers. So Microsoft, this is what I was waiting for. Microsoft, AWS, and Google supplied the underlying secure cloud architecture, while specialized U.S. robotics and industrial AI vendors automate heavy assembly lines. So the example they give is under a recent Pax Silica rollout, 5 U.S. robotics and AI firms, I don't know which ones they are, but began actively integrating automated smart systems into newly established economic security zones. Oh, this is what I was talking about before with in the Philippines. so that they would have that facility to build the chips and various technologies. The telecom, 5G, 6G, industrial Internet of Things is Finland and Sweden. To put AI into legacy industry like shipping port or copper mine, you need secure, hyperfast wireless data loops. The role, Nokia from Finland and Ericsson, which is Swedish, provide the 5G networks and the industrial Internet of Things hardware. So this is all about the Internet of Things, which for those who aren't familiar, this is like where everything is connected to everything else. And it's the like ground layer before they can build things like the Internet of Bodies, the Internet of Nanobio things, which they already do have to some extent. And the Internet of Bodies, they talk about your body being like a smart home, that you'd be connected to the entire Internet of Things, everything. The goal, they provide a market-based alternative to untrusted, high-risk telecommunications vendors like Huawei, I don't know Huawei, ensuring industrial data cannot be intercepted by foreign adversaries. So determining who's an ally, who's not. Specialized niche and sovereign capital anchors, Israel and the UAE. Israel brings specialized chip design, edge computing vendors, and predictive cyber defense software built directly into manufacturing hardware. The UAE and Qatar, technology firms backed by sovereign wealth funds like the UAE's AI firm G42, act as anchor tenants. They fund massive physical data centers built alongside legacy transport routes like the IMEC corridor. And then it says how this ecosystem renews legacy industries. Rather than upgrading software piece by piece, Pax Silica enforces AI native regional approach. A prime example, the newly slated 4,000-acre economic security zone at New Clark City in the Philippines. Instead of just exporting raw nickel and cobalt, a legacy mining industry, the Philippines uses processed mineral tech backed by Western capital. The trusted ecosystem of the U.S., Israeli, and Emirati AI firms built automated processing plants right at the source. This transforms raw material extraction into highly integrated component of the allied semiconductor supply chain. So that's kind of like where we're at with each country's role. Because the last time I looked into this, their roles weren't as developed, but that's what it looks like as a.
Yeah, I bet they are actively working on this. This trusted ecosystem of AI developers and vendors that is probably being built and developed right now to renew all these legacy industries. And then further down, they write, we believe that true economic security requires reducing excessive dependencies, like, for example, from China, and forging new connections with reliable partners and suppliers committed to fair market practices. Okay. And then they go on, at the same time, we will endeavor. So this is interesting. At the same time, we will endeavor to provide access to trusted partners to the full stack of technological advancements that are shaping the AI economy. So it sounds to me, and I would like to know what you think, it sounds to me that if you are not a trusted partner right now, like China, then the door is open to become a trusted partner. If you wish to do that, there is a way to become a trusted partner. And once you are a trusted partner, you will be part of the club.
I think so. Yeah, I do think that's.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that they want to bring China in because they have, all the minerals to make the chips. But I think they want to bring them in under where they have the leverage. So
yes, because reducing excessive dependencies, well, that's very difficult when it comes to critical earth minerals, for example, because China has a lot of them. China has massive amounts of these earth minerals, but they have even, I think they have like 98% of the the refining capacity of these minerals. So
Yeah.
talk about excessive dependencies. These are excessive dependencies that are not easily and quickly reducible, right?
Yeah.
And forging new connections, that's going to take a long time. It's going to be very, very difficult. And when
Yeah.
you look at Trump's visit with Xi Jinping, with these 17 CEOs in tow from the biggest tech companies and the banks and everything
Yeah.
you need to run the world economy, I mean, why were they there?
Right. Exactly. Why were they there? Yeah. Yeah. Very good question. Yeah.
And then it's almost over. Then in the end, it says, in this spirit, not really clear what, well, in this Pax Silicon spirit, I guess. In this
Right.
Pax Silicon spirit, we intend to further strengthen economic and national security cooperation. You see this all the time, the economy coupled with national security, including taking complementary actions as appropriate to address non-market policies and practices and enhancing investment security. So there's a military aspect to the whole thing, as far as I can
Yes.
tell. It's not just economic partnerships. No, it's national security as
Which
well.
seems very unconstitutional, right? Because there's a, isn't that like is it the Third Amendment? I think so. Like where you can't have a, like people think about it as like quartering, so they think like a soldier actually being in your home. But if you think about this as kind of like an extension of the military, in a way, it's like having soldier in your home, because like all of this technology, all the surveillance apparatus comes into your home. That's already at play, but this magnifies it quite a bit. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not making a legal claim, but it does seem like something that somebody who might be more versed in this than I might want to investigate.
That's a good idea. I would, yes, I think that's a good idea, because this whole economic and national security, it's like they are merging
Yeah,
in this AI context, right? It's
yeah.
so
I think that
powerful. The stuff is so powerful, and it's
because
so
they're saying that
auto.
military dominance is no
Yeah,
longer just about the weapons. That's what they're
yeah.
saying, right? That it's not just, it's also dependent on controlling the industrial supply and the empowering the artificial intelligence. So they're arguing that that's what military dominance is now extended to. Um, but yeah, it's, I don't
And
know.
then you also need, I mean, you need these you need these various components to build these very, very powerful systems that can be used just, yes, in civil society, but just as well for military applications.
Yes, I think very much in military applications. We're already using it in military their applications. So I mean, we saw it very much in the you know Ukraine war in Gaza. They were already using the AI technology.
Yeah, and from a Pax Silica, from a hegemonic perspective, that is, of course, a very, very important, if not the
I would
more important consideration.
I would think so. Yeah.
A- And then they say we seek to build and deploy trusted information networks, whole trusted, yeah, trusted information networks.
Yeah.
Of course, where there is trust, there is a lot of where there's a lot of trust, there's also a lot of distrust. So all the people who don't belong to the trusted information networks are people that are not trustworthy, not trusted, and should
Well,
probably be locked out of every economic transaction.
I kind of see trust in this case as kind of synonymous with control, right? Because it's whatever has already been approved. So it's whatever, right?
Good
That's been,
point.
yeah.
Good point. Trusted, and controllable. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Including, so they trusted, we seek to build and deploy trusted information networks, including information and communication technology systems, fiber optic cables, and data centers.
Uh-huh.
And
Yes.
then I think, yeah, they are the data centers. They did not add 4-hour peoples here.
Yeah, no, 'cause
that
the
was
people are
nice.
just
That was not.
they're the
That was.
Gatineaus. They're not the yeah.
Yeah. I think that was very nice of them not to, very honest not to add that. And then and then the last sentence is, through this cooperation, through this Silicon Pax thing, we pursue a comprehensive economic partnership to build, and now listen to this, to build an economic security order. An
Based
economic
on
security order, is that a normal expression, an economic security? I mean, economic order, I understand, but an economic security order?
it's, I think it's kind of revealing, but no, it's not
Yeah,
a typical
it's
phrase.
weird. An economic security order based, and it goes on, based on, of course, trust,
Of course.
or based on control, as you just pointed out, technological complementarity, shared interests, and a shared commitment to a more prosperous future. Well,
So
yeah.
interesting because, they're shifting the global trading system away from pure profit to national defense and supply chain survival,
Uh-huh.
which is, yeah, when I say it's very telling, it kind of foreshadows what they think the future is gonna look like. Like, so if you think about it as a Pax, Silica, so it's a hegemonic, if we think about it in that terms, this is that's why it needs to be about national defense and about having the supplies, right? So the economy then becomes, yeah, an economic security order, which is,
Yes, it serves, it serves the security. So whatever this economic system is, it really serves the security. And if it can't do that, then there is no room for it.
yeah. Well, it kind of indicates that there's going to be a lot of turmoil and that they need to have the control to squash it.
And then in the end, the last few words here, and a shared commitment to a more prosperous future. That's just like a throwaway. We haven't really talked about prosperous. So let's just put that in
Well,
there. Everybody
my
wants a
question
more
would be
prosperous
prosperous
future.
for who? Like, for whom?
That's a good point. Yes.
I think it
For,
might be very prosperous, but I'm not really sure that that means for the people. Yeah, I think
yeah.
that, yeah, it's gonna be for the people who control the rails, who
Well, they
control
did again. They were very honest, and they didn't put for our peoples. They
yeah.
they love to talk about their peoples. It's fun to talk about the peoples, but they didn't do that there.
No.
So maybe prosperity for their peoples isn't that important for them. I don't know. But what a hell of a declaration.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's almost like a mystical text.
yeah, well, I keep thinking they didn't say it here, but, I keep thinking golden age, right? Which for those who are not familiar, really comes out of traditionalism, which is capital T traditionalism. This is based on, René Guénon, Julius Evola, and, people like Alexander Dugin are big followers of traditionalism, as is, Steve Bannon as well. So this is kind of a lot of the Eurasianists are big supporters of this traditionalist philosophy, but it's essentially a form of perennialism. And they talk about the golden age. They talk about, returning to a golden age, and it's a, yeah, not exactly a golden age for us. so,
What is Eurasianism?
so Eurasianism is, like it's kind of a concept that's aligned with multipolarity. So it's the idea that we should not have a, hegemonic, Western order. So this idea of multipolarity, where they see the United States as having, hegemony, the Pax Americana, right, is a way to think of that. And, they say it's through the petrodollar system, right, that we have control mostly over the world, and they see it as being a very oppressive system, and they want to bring a rise of Russia and China, And they say that it will be a much more, they call it multipolarity. So they say it'll be a much more egalitarian kind of system. But it is really all about taking down America and the West. And so this is this Eurasianist multipolarity concept. People like Alexander Dugin are big proponents of it. Um, and they talk, so they're also inspired. So traditionalism has overlap with this concept of multipolarity and Eurasianism, but the traditionalism is a mystical kind of concept. So it's the idea that we're uh, the the earth and time moves in cycles. It's kind of derived from the Hindu concept of the cyclical patterns of timing. And they say that we're moving towards like an apocalyptic stage. And so we need to return to a much earlier kind of a time with a more traditional period, pre-modernity, essentially. And so it's this idea that modernity is the root of all evil. I'm simplifying, but yeah, that's essentially. So they say that we're headed towards the Kali Yuga, but they talk a lot about the Golden Age, and whenever they do, I think it's more of an esoteric nod to the elites. It's not so much about a Golden Age for us.
Before we end, I would like to discuss two more things with regard to this Pax Silica. First of all, what is Trump's role in building this empire? And then the second thing, what happens when countries buy into this Pax Silica AI stack and become dependent on it? How can they ever leave this thing? Can they not? But first, about Trump. I mean, when people elected Trump in November, when was it? 2024, seems an eternity ago, really. I guess very few people suspected. There were people who suspected it. I was not among them. I was way too clueless, but there were people who had an idea that his presidency would bring the building of some sort of technocratic empire with AI in the middle of it. But how many people do you think, how many Americans actually knew about that? And also, was Trump aware that he was going to do that in his second term?
Okay. Well, I'm not privy to answer that, definitively, but I can speculate and give you my opinion in that regard. I do think, as far as the amount of people, I think there was a small percentage. There were certainly people who were warning about it. I kept warning. My indication actually came more from RFK Jr. because I knew he was a big proponent of AI precision medicine, which was an initiative that Obama tried to put forth. There was a whole document on the NBIC back in 2002, which was kind of like a biodigital convergence type document. So I knew that he was a huge proponent of that. He was part of, what was it? His venture capital firm, Vantage Partners, that one, that has some like kind of biodigital convergence adjacent interests, investments. And so I knew that much, and I was very concerned that the MAHA labeling was kind of a Trojan horse for some of these biodigital convergence agendas, particularly precision AI medicine. And of course, the day after Trump gets into office, he announces Project Stargate, which was
I know.
essentially
The day after. He couldn't even wait. The day after.
The day after, right? And to me, it was just kind of like funny in like a spectacle kind of a way, because he starts asking all these questions about medicine. And I think it was Sam Altman who tried to answer these questions. And first of all, I didn't see any doctors on the stage, but that didn't seem to matter. But Sam Altman essentially muttered something that was it was unintelligible as far as I'm concerned. It was not helpful. But Larry Ellison rose to the occasion, and he told us all about AI precision medicine. And so so that he told us that essentially we were going to be able to use genomic data in order to predict who might be at risk for cancer, and that we could use mRNA technologies in order to prevent it. So
oh my God, Courtenay, that is like pre-crime.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, and it's very concerning because when you start to look at systems like Pax Silica, when you start to think about the cybernetic organism that I keep talking about, imagine how genomic data is going to play. Like, so just hypothetically thinking about it, you could have someone's genomic data and it predicts that they might have a tendency towards ADHD. I'm just making things up, but they might have a tendency towards ADHD. Then they go to apply for a job and apply for insurance. And they get denied from both because the employer says, well, I don't know that you could concentrate enough. You might be a risk. And then the insurance says, oh, well, you might need more medication or you might be a higher risk for these other illnesses. And so we're going to deny you or we're going to charge you this much more.
Like surveillance pricing.
Yes. So this is how, it becomes part of this conditionally based, system. And so anyway, with the Project Stargate, that was only a day after. So I don't know if Trump knew, but I can't imagine that. I don't think it's so much about like, did he know that he was going to be the technocratic president? I think it's more, there's a document on the CIA.gov that you can pull down. It's called Mice to Rascals. And MICE stands for money, ideology, compliance, coercion, ego. And they decided Rascals was a better framework. It's very similar. It's like reciprocity, authority, scarcity, social proofing, and likeness. It's very similar, but they said that this was a way of recruiting like military, and they didn't say like change agents, but that's essentially what they alluded to. And they said that this was derived from the OSS, and I can't prove it, but it really sounds like it came out of the War Office Selection Boards. This was during World War II. Tavistock had designed a bunch of testing modalities for picking change agents, literally. And that's what it sounds like it's coming from. But in any case, all of this just to say that I think that's more how this operates. So whether or not he knew he was going to be the quote unquote technocratic president, I don't know. But I think he was sold a bunch of interests. They appealed to his ego. He's got a bunch of deals. We know about the World Liberty Financial, which I think is a huge part of why the Clarity Act is like being pushed so heavily. And right now it's only at a 46% approval. I really hope people continue to push back against it because that is the key, the conduit for mass scale tokenization of everything. And people need to push back against that. Because if they want to retain any kind of freedom, in my opinion, that's kind of how I see it. But he stands to gain so much. And a lot of people have critiqued that it's a conflict of interest because it's essentially like they become they make money on like every transaction because they're the issuer.
Oh my God. I know. Do they ever? I mean, it's just absolute incredibly mass grifting. The billions of dollars they have made already. It's absolutely unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, billion. And they stand to, if this goes through, I mean, the billions that they would make. And the partnerships that they have with these Gulf states in order to create this, structure. So I don't, what I'm saying is that I think it's more about like deals, there's incentives. I think I think he sold it as like, this is a great way that you'll be a hero. You're advancing progress. You're advancing the technology and you're making things efficient, expedient, creating hegemony, make America great again.
Yes.
So this is your legacy, but then it's also personal incentives because, he's setting up his whole family. He set himself up with essentially a world monarch as the head of the Board of Peace. And then the Board of Trade.
Which we haven't even talked about yet, but yeah, absolutely. Which gives them political power in perpetuum, really.
Immense political power. And then the Board of Trade, which essentially, so the Board of Peace is like a rebrand of the UN. And then you've got the Board of Trade, which theoretically could replace the World Trade Organization. And now they're doing the Board of Investments, which is creating a investment structure for Pax Silica. So there's, I know this is super long-winded, but I don't, people tend to like to villainize people as in like they know and they came in with this master plan, but I see it more as like people get motivated by incentives. And That's why the Meister rascals, and I think putting an F at the end of my mice is probably useful, like familial ties. I think that's often what motivates people. It's like they're either driven by the money, the ideology, they're compromised in some regard, or they have these massive egos. And Trump has,
Yes.
and then the familial ties, and
Yeah.
Trump has a lot of those. So
That makes a lot of sense to me, because I mean, if you tell him how big and beautiful it's going to be and how it's going to profit his own family at the same time, what's not to like? And I mean, that probably wasn't so difficult. Now,
no,
I would think, no, it's incredible. I mean, the grifting, that the sheer, I mean, it's corruption. It's just corruption at a level that is mind-boggling, and it's just scary that the media is not all over it. You would think that the media but no, of course, the mainstream media. But even the independent media, I don't think there's that much reporting on it, and there should be. It's so
they're not
outrageous.
covering this angle. I mean, it's weird to me because even the people who are very aware of technocracy and focusing on some of these angles, like they're covering some of these points, they seem to be hyper focused on Israel. And I'm like, you're missing the boat. Like, this is they're a node. I mean, we don't talk about the Singapore cartel, but they are just as big a node in this Pax Silica. So I'm not saying that Israel's not involved. They are, but this is a much bigger picture. And right now, it looks like with some of these rails, they're being cut out. Actually, so I just think people are missing the deals that are going on between Trump's family, Witkoff, Kushner, and this is really not America, right? This isn't. We're not benefiting from them. These are private companies, and even with Pax Silica. When you listen to Jacob Helberg, in the speech that I listened to, he said that they're kind of bypassing the government infrastructure and using private companies. And he explicitly said that. He said that because the way he framed it was, of course, that would appeal to Americana, it was that, private companies can expand and innovate. And, so he appeals to that sensibility of the American dream, and which I support, obviously, but he's using that as a marketing ploy to tell people that we're going to use the private company. That's essentially public-private partnerships. I mean, why are private companies at the front of a major geopolitical initiative?
Mm-hmm.
Right? People aren't talking about it from that angle, and that to me is really where we're being completely alienated from our rights, and where to me it does feel very unconstitutional. This is not. They're using a geopolitical diplomacy as a cover for private deals, essentially. It would be how
Yes, that's exactly correct. And their peoples, the only influence they have or allegedly still have is by voting. And if these government representatives are not even playing any role anymore, I mean, increasingly, government elected officials, people that are elected or hopefully elected. And in some cases, they're still honestly being elected, although in many cases that is not even any. But that's a different question. So let's just say it's a elected official. These elected officials increasingly and I think ever faster lose their power. They no longer play the role they used to play, and it's the speed at which this is happening is also in absolutely astonishing. And I think many people are not aware of it, that they are being taken over, that they're relegated to some overflow room. Whereas the big business guys are being pulled into the meeting with Xi Jinping and Trump. Now the other question is, once this network of these trusted and controlled partners has been built, they become dependent on it. You are completely locked in because the system is such that it locks you in. You cannot just walk away. You're going to say, I don't like this. I don't have the freedom. I don't have the independence to make decisions as that I used to have. And no, kind of doesn't suit me. I'm going to leave this and do my own thing. That is no longer possible. I don't see how that would be possible. Or is there a way out of it?
No, I think they want to foster dependency. Right? That's how they can create the control. That's how they create hegemony. And I think that a lot of this is like when you were speculating about bringing China in. I think this is a way they can have complete control if they did come in, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
So I don't think they would be opposed to bringing them in only if they have complete control, and it would just be the way they see it is to serve the Pax Silica, to serve them,
Hmm.
not as a quote unquote partner, you know. But I don't even know. I don't know if right now they're trying to route China completely is how this looks. So especially with
Well,
the
that's the best way to bring them in, right?
yeah, that exactly, because they're kind of a choke point, and so
Hmm.
yeah, so they'd like to. I think they'd like to bring them in, but only if they can control them.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely, because
yeah,
only then they can be trusted.
yeah.
Um, okay. All right. Well, at least we there were so many other things I wanted to talk
Oh,
about. Uh, but that was way too ambitious. And it's fine. We touched and that's totally fine because we touched on so many things. That was wonderful.
thank you. Yeah, what were your other topics? I'm just curious.
Oh, let me see. So I wanted to talk more about China, namely
Okay.
how it's a partner and how it has been a partner for many decades.
Hmm.
And but this image is being built up that somehow, yeah, somehow that wasn't done deliberately. I'm sure it was, and it goes back to Kissinger and Brzezinski and all that.
Yes,
Um,
I always give people the
that
visual of Bush, and Kissinger running through China on the bikes. There,
that's right. I
yeah,
heard you say that. Yes.
right,
Yeah.
the rapprochement plan. Yeah, essentially we built China, so it's very much kind of like like a remodeling or a uh, modeled off of the British East India Company kind of blueprint. This was to export all the manufacturing over to China, so we would have like the cheap manufacturing. So we built China essentially.
Hmm.
I like when they talk about Mao. Even Mao was part of a Yale in China program, which is still like a Western kind of you know training. So that's not to say like I mean he wasn't. Mao still was very much outside of that, but there still was some involvement. So I think that's interesting as well. So going even that far back. But
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
we
absolutely. Do you know about Mao? He didn't want to travel to. He was asked as a member of the Communist Party. They asked him to come to France and to meet people there and do some studying.
Mhm,
And he just was too lazy and couldn't be bothered. He didn't want to go to France, so he said no to all this. But they wanted him. And many other people did,
mhm,
like many of the other people who later became very influential in the Chinese Communist Party. But Mao stayed in China. He was one of the few who later
mhm.
made, had a meteor like ascent in the party. But he said, no, he couldn't be bothered. He couldn't be bothered. He was just too lazy.
Too lazy.
to get off his couch and make it over to Paris and spend a year or so so there.
That's funny. Yeah, so I mean, we built them, and I think it was kind of to for our interests was what we were building them for. I do think that they have grown far past that, obviously. So when people look at these, they're used very much as like a rival, right? They're always pitting us against China, and
That's the
I
narrative. That's always the narrative,
narrative
right? The arch
exactly.
enemy. Yes, we have to do
Even
it. We have to do all this accelerated AI, scary as it is, because China. It's always
yeah.
because China.
Well, and I think even like the what's it called? The Chatham House was doing videos in 2024 about Cold War with China. So they kind of like crafted this whole narrative, and it becomes the excuse. But I think we look at history, in the Cold War with Russia, like we were always told they were the enemies, and then there was all this collusion behind the scenes. So, Oracle has had a foothold in China, building the Chinese technocratic infrastructure since the 80s, essentially since Tiananmen Square. So, so that's our Silicon Valley technology. So
and colluding with the most mass murderous countries in the world, right? I mean, when you look at China, it's just incredible, the sheer number of people that were killed under Mao Zedong.
Yeah. So, I'm not I don't look at these things as black and white, because I think that this is a bigger conversation. I'll just, make this kind of brief, but just to give people a kind of taste of it. But people talk about like kind of the vertical hierarchy versus the horizontal. And what I mean by that is like a supranational kind of a driver where that's top down, versus the lateral competing kind of nation states. And I think both actually are valid. I think both play a role. I think there are supranational kind of drivers. It doesn't mean I think that there's one group that's a shadowy cabal. I think it's way more complicated than that, unfortunately, because if there was just like one, then you could just cut off that head of the Hydra, right? And then all your problems would go away. It's just not that simple. And this is why I always say that convergence beats conspiracy every time, because there's not one executive to just, do away with. And you can't just point the finger. This is why when you look at, organized crime, the head mafioso typically has all these like minions doing his bidding for him, because it makes it way harder to trace, way harder to stop. And so, but I think there is still lateral.
Courtney, sorry to interrupt, but this convergence is more like the invisible hand.
Exactly. Yeah, it becomes the invisible hand, and it's because you've got these mutually aligned interests and competing
exactly.
interests.
Right. Yeah.
So it's mutual. You've got incentives. So competing incentives, competing interests, but they converge. They all converge. And so I think that's very much what we see. But China becomes the boogeyman, and it becomes very convenient. So, but right now, I don't think that that's what's going on. I think that they're being utilized because they're really a choke point for this, for the chips, for all the minerals.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So they have to get them into the club somehow.
It seems that way. I mean, wasn't Huang Jensen on the plane? Right?
Oh yeah, not only that, Trump called him from, I think, Air Force One and said, "Hey, come over, hop on in Alaska. We need to talk." And then he walked off after the meeting in Beijing with, I think, $150 billion in contracts in his pocket or something like that. It was worth for him hopping on the plane, hopping on Air Force One in Alaska. Alaska.
Good deal.
Yes, I wish I would have heard what they talked about. They had plenty of time to talk.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Courtney. It was a pleasure.